A water sample from a home in Flint, Michigan came back at over 1,000 parts per billion of lead. The EPA's action level is 15. That sample didn't just exceed the limit, it exceeded the EPA's own threshold for hazardous waste. And the state kept telling residents the water was safe. We'll get into all of that. We'll also get into the state that literally went to war with Ohio, lost, got a booby prize, and somehow came out richer than Ohio will ever be. And the football team named after an animal that almost certainly never lived there. Here are 20 facts that prove Michigan is completely unhinged. Number 1. In 2014, Michigan's state-appointed emergency manager switched Flint's drinking water source from Detroit's regional system to the Flint River to save money. Nobody applied corrosion control treatment to the aging pipes. Lead began leaching directly into the water supply of roughly 100,000 residents. State and federal officials were warned repeatedly by researchers, doctors, and residents themselves. For 18 months, they dismissed every warning, challenged the science, and kept telling people the water was fine. Number 2. One home in Flint tested at over 1,000 parts per billion of lead. The EPA's action level, the point at which they require intervention, is 15 parts per billion. The EPA's own threshold for classifying material as hazardous waste is 5,000. That single tap in a family's home in a residential neighborhood in Flint came back at nearly 70 times the action limit. The family living there had been told, repeatedly and officially, that the water was safe to drink. Number 3. Between 6,000 and 14,000 children drank the contaminated water before anyone in authority admitted there was a problem. Lead exposure in children has no safe threshold. It causes permanent neurological damage, lower IQ, behavioral problems, learning disabilities that don't resolve with time or treatment. The state of Michigan poisoned thousands of children, and researchers say the full scope of those consequences won't be measurable for decades. Number 4. After the water switch, fertility rates in Flint dropped 12%. Fetal deaths rose 58%. The contamination didn't just harm the children who drank it, it affected whether children were born at all. In 2021, former Governor Rick Snyder and 8 other officials were charged with a combined 41 criminal counts. Snyder himself faced 2 counts of willful neglect of duty. Both were misdemeanors for poisoning a city. Number 5. General Motors figured it out before the government did. In October 2014, months before state officials acknowledged a single thing was wrong, GM quietly switched its Flint engine plant off Flint River water. The reason? The water was corroding engine parts. A corporation noticed that the water was destroying metal components and acted immediately to protect its machinery. The government looked at the same water, received warnings from doctors and EPA scientists, and kept telling 100,000 people to drink it. Number 6. On Christmas Eve 1913, someone at a crowded holiday party in Calumet screamed fire. The party was being held in a packed Union Hall for striking copper miners and their families. Hundreds of people jammed onto an upper floor with narrow staircases leading down. There was no fire. 73 people died in the stampede that followed. 59 of them were children. Nobody was ever charged. Multiple witnesses said they saw a man wearing a Citizens Alliance button, an anti-union group funded by the mining companies, shout the word fire and then vanish into the crowd. The case was never prosecuted. Number 7. In 1835, Michigan and Ohio nearly went to war over a narrow strip of land along their shared border, about 468 square miles containing the mouth of the Maumee River and the future site of Toledo. Both states mobilized armed militias. There was one reported casualty, an Ohioan stabbed in the leg by a Michigander, reportedly while both men were drunk. Congress stepped in, awarded the Toledo Strip to Ohio, and handed Michigan the western portion of the Upper Peninsula as a consolation prize. Michigan's own governor called it a sterile region of perpetual snows. Number 8. The Upper Peninsula turned out to contain approximately 95% of the nation's copper. In 1869 alone, Michigan's Upper Peninsula produced more copper than the entire rest of the United States combined. The land Michigan's own governor dismissed as a worthless frozen wasteland became one of the most mineral-rich regions in North American history. Ohio got Toledo. Michigan got the copper. The score has never been close. Number 9. The copper in Michigan's Upper Peninsula wasn't just abundant, it was geologically bizarre. Miners pulled pure metallic copper directly out of the rock. Not copper ore that required smelting. Not copper bound up in other minerals. Solid native copper, chunks and veins of the actual finished metal, sitting in the ground ready to be lifted out. That almost never happens anywhere else on Earth. One single mass of native copper extracted from a Michigan mine weighed over 500 tons. Number 10. In December 1936, workers occupied the General Motors plants in Flint and refused to leave. The sit-down strike lasted 44 days. GM got a court order demanding their removal. The strikers ignored it. The governor called in the National Guard, not to evict the workers, but to protect them from the police and corporate strikebreakers trying to get in. By February 1937, GM's monthly production had collapsed from 50,000 cars to 125. 125 cars, the largest industrial corporation in the world, grinding to a near-complete halt because workers sat down and refused to stand up. Number 11. When the Flint sit-down strike ended, UAW membership went from 30,000 to 500,000 within a single year. Wages for auto workers increased by as much as 300%. Within 2 weeks of the settlement, 87 new sit-down strikes launched in Detroit alone. The tactic spread to rubber, steel, textiles, and retail across the country. One strike in one Michigan city restructured the American labor movement and permanently reshaped wages across the entire economy. Number 12. Detroit was declared capital of the Michigan Territory on June 11, 1805. That same day, a fire broke out and burned the entire city to the ground. Every structure gone. The brand new territorial government's first act was to rebuild the city it had just been handed from a pile of ash. Detroit's official motto, Speramus Meliora Resurget Cineribus, translates to, "We hope for better things, it shall rise from the ashes." They were not being poetic, they meant it literally. Number 13. In 2013, Detroit filed for bankruptcy. The debt landed between $18 and $20 billion, the largest municipal bankruptcy in American history, and it wasn't close. The next biggest was Jefferson County, Alabama, at around $4 billion. Detroit owed more than 4 times what the second largest municipal bankruptcy in U.S. history had ever totaled. The city that built the American automobile industry filed for the largest government insolvency this country has ever seen. Number 14. At the time of the bankruptcy filing, Detroit's population had fallen below 700,000, a loss of more than 60% from its 1950 peak of 1.85 million. Over 78,000 buildings sat vacant inside the city limits. Entire neighborhoods had been effectively abandoned. Some blocks had a single occupied house for every 10 empty lots. City officials began serious discussions about formally shrinking Detroit's borders and allowing sections of it to return to grassland. Number 15. Michigan is officially called the Wolverine State. There is no credible evidence that a self-sustaining wolverine population has existed in Michigan for at least 200 years, and possibly ever. The nickname most likely came from fur traders shipping wolverine pelts from Canada through the region, or from Ohioans using it as an insult during the Toledo War, since wolverines were known for being vicious and difficult to kill. The state named itself after an animal that in all likelihood never lived there. Number 16. In 2004, a lone wolverine appeared in Michigan's Thumb region, the first confirmed sighting in the state in over 200 years. Wildlife officials compared the encounter to a polar bear showing up in Florida. She was photographed on trail cameras for 6 years. Researchers tracked her movements and wrote papers about her. She died of old age in 2010. The leading scientific theory is that she was either an escaped captive animal or an exotic pet someone had released. Michigan's only wolverine in 2 centuries was probably someone's illegal pet. Number 17. Michigan football coach Fielding Yost decided the team needed a live wolverine mascot. He wrote letters to 68 different animal trappers across the state, asking them to find one. Not one of them could locate a wolverine in Michigan. Yost eventually borrowed several from a zoo. They attacked the handlers at their first public appearance and had to be returned immediately. The university has never had a live wolverine mascot. The most famous wolverine in Michigan history is animated. Number 18. Michigan abolished the death penalty in 1846, making it the first English-speaking government in the world to do so. Not the first American state. The first English-speaking government on the planet. Britain kept executing people for another century. Australia, Canada, and New Zealand all kept it. A state that had been in the Union for less than a decade beat every English-speaking nation on Earth to abolition by generations. Michigan has never executed a single person since statehood, and the ban was written into the state constitution in 1963. Number 19. The Great Lakes storm of 1913 struck Michigan's coastline over 4 days in November, driving hurricane-force winds above 100 miles per hour across open water. 12 ships sank. 19 more were stranded. Roughly 250 people died. It remains the largest inland maritime disaster in American history. More vessels lost in 4 days on a freshwater lake than in most naval engagements. The storm was so catastrophic and so poorly forecast that meteorologists still study it as a baseline for how badly wrong Great Lakes weather can turn. Number 20. Michigan still has a law in the books making it a felony for a man to seduce an unmarried woman. The penalty is up to 5 years in state prison. The law was written in 1931 and has never been repealed. The same legal code classified adultery as a felony if the wronged spouse filed a complaint. Michigan also had a law against unmarried couples living together that wasn't removed from the books until 2023. The state that gave the world the assembly line and the sit-down strike was still technically enforcing a Victorian morality code well into the 21st century. Michigan went to war with Ohio over Toledo, lost, accepted the Upper Peninsula as a consolation prize, and then found nearly all of the nation's copper buried inside it. Then it poisoned its own city's water supply and charged the governor with misdemeanors. The Wolverine doesn't even live here. What's the Michigan story that still doesn't make sense to you? Drop it below. Next up, Colorado is unhinged.